Welcome to EdUp Curriculum. I am your host, Nicole Poff. I'm really excited about today's conversation. You may have seen Reach University in your LinkedIn news, or Craft Education, or WGU. There's lots of news articles and just awesome things happening within all of those lanes. And so today I have someone who I'm really excited about. It's going to help us kind of connect the dots. Mallory, thank you so much for being here. Could you introduce yourself a little bit more to us?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I'm Mallory Dwinal-Palisch, and I am a lifelong advocate for education being blended together with workforce pathways. But the routes that I have taken to get there have varied over the years. So I started as an academic. I did my PhD on teacher shortages and thinking through alternative ways to end teacher vacancies, especially in rural communities. After that, I became a teacher with Teach for America. After that, I founded a charter high school that was focused on sort of taking some of those learnings from my doctoral research and creating a new pathway for developing homegrown talent to become the educators in schools. And inside of that charter school, as we saw lots of excitement and success for the model, but really struggled with having the right higher education partner, became the founder of Reach University. And Reach University is an incredible institution that I am so impressed by the amazing people there, and have officially transitioned out as of about 2 months ago for our next chapter. But first, a little bit about Reach. Reach University is a partner to several hundred school districts across about 4 or 5 different states, where they help take classified staff, so paraprofessionals, classroom aides, high dosage tutors, and turn those jobs into apprenticeships that confer college credit and allow that person to earn their college degree and to become a teacher at their school without ever leaving the workforce or the classroom. And as we were doing that work, we realized the applicability of that pathway, right? Of turning jobs that we traditionally assumed required a 4-year college degree where you left the workplace and went and sat in classrooms for 4 years, started to realize that that wouldn't just be true for teaching. We could rethink these pathways for lots of careers like social work, nursing, etc. And so Craft is the data tool we'd been building to manage that work. Western Governors University acquired Craft about 2 months ago, a little over 2 months ago, with the goal of turning it into a public data utility that creates millions of apprenticeship degree pathways across all of higher education and our workforce writ large.
I have so many things to say. Um, this is so cool. So I met people from Reach earlier in the year at the WAS conference, and
Mhm.
I was sharing, we were in a session and I didn't know they were from Reach. I didn't know Reach, but I was sharing ideas, and then these people across the room, they just kept like little bits of brilliance just kept coming from their table. And I'm like, who are these people? They are really smart and they really have a pulse on what the students need. Like they sound like they're doing some awesome stuff. So we connected after the session and they worked at Reach University. So we've
I'm
stayed in contact. And I was talking with them maybe a couple weeks ago, and they were like, did you know that Mallory, this kind of all stemmed from her dissertation? And
not.
I did not know that because they tell you, like, your dissertation, only your mom is going to read your dissertation.
Well, and I'm pretty sure even my mom didn't read my dissertation. And so, I think she looked at it and was like, that's nice, sweetheart, but I don't love you that much. And
I'll put it on
so
my shelf. Yeah.
exactly, it looks really pretty. And that was ultimately the reason that I left the academy, right? I was passionate about the project I was researching, but I didn't feel like it was the way in which I was going to contribute to the problem being solved. And so it was Reach University is now obviously an organization that is filled with so many smart people, as Reach is, achieves great things because of all of the smart people doing all of their things. So the very small brick that I have to lay in the foundation of that institution is that, yeah, it did. It was my doctoral dissertation came up with a bunch of conclusions around how we thought higher ed should function. And when we just could not get higher education to offer those concrete things, we just decided to put them in action for ourselves.
It's such a cool model. It's like, I mean, as you were saying it, I'm like, oh, this is even cooler when she talks about it. Um, with craft and with Western Governor, what's kind of next for it? Because as you're talking about education, I'm like, every field, this this is viable for every field, not just education. So it sounds like that's the direction craft is going in. So
That's
what does
right.
the future look like for craft and Western Governor?
Yeah. So I think what's important to think about when we think about the future is what does it look like for the learner? And then what does that mean must be true for craft and for Western governors and for everyone else? So if we get this right, what will happen is that 10 years from now, there will be no such thing as skilled labor vacancies. And there will be no such thing as student loan debt. Those two things will both go away. Because what will happen is, let's imagine Mallory is a high school junior who thinks she wants to go into healthcare. By the way, I did used to think I want to go into healthcare, but I'm a total weenie when it comes to blood and needles. So this is now a complete hypothetical. But let's imagine that this was a stronger, tougher, more resilient Mallory in 10th grade. And she was thinking that, I really want to become a nurse or a doctor down the road. That she would then sign up for her career and technical education cluster of courses that focuses on that body of work. And she would get to not just study it in the theory of, oh, here's a workbook on it, and take this online quiz on if you'd like to be a nurse, but actually get to go in and work in different healthcare settings and figure out, does she want to be a respiratory therapist? Does she want to be a rad tech? Does she want to be an ICU nurse? What actually does she want to do in that space? And then once Mallory says, what I really want to do is I want to be a surgical nurse. That then she graduates high school with a first credential that lets her get her foot in the door in the industry, maybe as a medical assistant or whatever else it might be. And then to work her way up in that setting where she graduates high school, she immediately has a job in one of those frontline roles. But that job doesn't stop there. It becomes an apprenticeship that without ever leaving the workforce and without ever taking on student loan debt, the workforce becomes her college degree, and she gets to move up into being that surgical nurse that the hospitals desperately needed and that she's always wanted to be. That's the vision of what we're trying to achieve, and trying to do that at scale, of helping people first discern what they want to do and then find fast routes into those workplaces where they can earn and learn their way up into the place that's the right fit for them while they make a family sustaining wage. For that to come true, what craft needs to be is, we talk about it as being like a public data utility. I think a more concrete way to put that is it needs to become our road system, right? Our goal is not to tell you that you need to go to the grocery store or that you need to go to the gas station. Our goal is not to tell you which of those, which gas station in particular you're going to go to. Our goal is to create the infrastructure that connects all of those things so that you can chart your life, right? So that you can wake up and say, today I need to go run some errands and I need to get gas in my tank and I need to go buy groceries and then I need to go pick my kid up from school. And as you chart your own life, we are there to make that this seamless possibility by creating that connective tissue between the different things that need to be true for you. And so that's what craft is looking to do. What this will mean for us is that we will stay and remain a free public data utility, a nonprofit that is looking to allow learners to navigate those many places in the world and have the dollars and the credits they deserve follow them along the way without them having to figure out how to stitch it together for themselves.
I mean, this like potentially changes the entire landscape um, tremendously.
There are millions of positions that employers every day say, I need to fill this role. It is a good paying job. I've got the money set aside for it, and I need someone who can do it. And every day, oftentimes in those same companies, there are millions of individuals who are working in the frontline roles that we have until now thought of as being dead end jobs, right? Like I will work at the front desk in this hospital and I will every day come within inches of people who hold the job I want to have, but I will never be able to turn this job into that job. There's always been this glass wall that sort of divides those worlds from one another. And our belief is that no job should be a dead end job, right? Those frontline roles should have pathways that allow you to stack into the skilled positions that have family sustaining wages that would allow a person to have a fulfilling life. We have to make that possible.
This is so cool. One of the concepts that I do you know Dr. Joe Solucio?
Yes, I'm a huge fan of his. That's actually how
Okay,
I first met this podcast.
perfect. So one of his terms is rapid return on investment, right? Like we need a more rapid return on investment versus 4 years. This is a rapid return on investment without the actual investment piece. It's like rapid return on investing in yourself.
That's right. And I think that's the thing that, I'll hear a lot of people talk about, well, you should have to invest in your education. You do. You invest with your time, you invest with missing kids' soccer games and birthday parties and staying up late at night stressing about it. And if there's a way to make that investment in yourself productive along the way, right? Where it is allowing you to fill a job that an employer needs filled today and allows you to become ready to be the job or the person to fill the job that they need tomorrow. That is why would we not create those pathways where you don't have to wait 4 years? And I think people talk about that waiting like, oh, it's just people are impatient or they're lazy or they expect everything handed to them right away. If you are trying to make ends meet and figuring out a way to pay for your kids' asthma medication and to put gas in your car, it is certainly not laziness or impatience. It is the reality of being a provider. And so we have to understand that so many Americans live in that duty every day, right? Whether it is a sibling or a parent or a child or someone else that they are caring for, they don't have the luxury of waiting. And so us locking them out of the economy where they could provide skills in positions we desperately need and they could access a living wage in doing that. I mean, it makes no sense and it's a loss for everyone.
I agree. And I love your brain for thinking of this because, higher ed, we've tried to solve this in a lot of different ways, right? Certificate, micro credentials.
Mhm.
There's a wide range in which higher ed has tried to solve this problem. But you like flipped it all on its head and said, this is how we solve this.
This is the big thing that I think we in higher education get wrong is that we have a very hard time seeing ourselves anywhere other than at the very center of the universe. And so we go out and we do, right? And so we go out and we build credentials and we build degrees and we build pathways that fit inside of our system. And we never stop to ask, are these credentials that our employers actually want and find value for? Are they delivered in a way that is actually accessible for our learners? And I don't even just mean in terms of the intellectual content, I mean in terms of the time of day we expect them to use it, how much money we expect them to pay for it, how long it is until that actually delivers a change in their life. We build so many products in a vacuum and then are surprised when there is an uptake. And the value of an apprenticeship degree of this movement is that we are flipping that on its head. And we are first going to employers and their employees. And we are saying, what are the frontline positions you have today? What are the mid-skilled positions you want those folks to eventually like work their way up into, and how do we get them there? And you tell us. And if you tell me that someone can go from being a certified nursing assistant to a licensed practical nurse to an associate degree registered nurse up to a bachelor's of science nurse and even all the way up to getting their master's degree and becoming a preceptor that teaches other future nurses, if you're telling me that's what you need and that if we build that pathway you will support your employees going up through it, that is how we have to build this work. It has to start with the employer and us mapping to what they need, not us building something and then hoping the employer comes and maps their workday around us.
Totally. I mean, we live by the if we build it, they will come, right? Like
That's right.
we built this really great program. Okay, let's sit here and wait for all the enrollments to come our ways because we built it.
That's right. And this is not the field of dreams, right? Great movie, very impractical advice for upskilling in the future of work. And so that is too many of us in the higher ed world watched that movie and decided that that was how things were going to work for us too.
That's our motto. Well, and on the other side of that, students they graduate, they just spent 4 years with us, or sometimes it's just a 2 year or a certificate program, and they get done and they're like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to work. Where's my job? And you're like, oh shoot, you don't have experience though.
That's
So
right. That's exactly right. And that's the other thing is that, if you backwards plan this, the way this should work is that there should never be a world in which someone gets their degree and hopes they can then go find a job using it, right? This should instead be an employer saying, I need nurses. Mallory, you work in my hospital. And while you might not currently have the skills or the knowledge, you have the mindset, you have the attitude, you have the behaviors. Like, you show up every day committed to our patients, and you should become one of our nurses. And if you go get this credential, and we will, when I say go get it, I mean never even leave our building. We will turn our hospital into your nursing campus. And when you get that credential, you don't have to wonder if you can go find a job. We're telling you right now, we are waiting to hire you into that role as soon as you finish your training, and we will upskill you along the way. And so that, when we always talk about 5 pillars to an apprenticeship degree, and the first is that professional capital, that you are building it with an employer. And then when someone is going through it, the employer already put their mark on them saying, I believe in this person. And when they get through this training, I will be there waiting to hire them.
I love that. I worked at a medical college and it was in San Diego, which everyone, it's a competitive marketplace, right? So we had surgical techs, respiratory therapists, and we would have to go into the classroom and say, you want to be a respiratory therapist? Guess what? It's probably not going to be in San Diego because you're competing against the entire world. So you and your family better get ready to take a job in Nebraska to
Mm-hmm.
get some experience. That was a conversation we had to have all the time.
That's right. And that is such a loss because, I think about my own family. I can't, I'm place bound. I live close to in-laws. I've got a whole family structure here, and we can't move. And so there are so many people where if you were to tell them, hey, you're going to have to move to take this job, it's like, well, what's a job that I can take here? But we wait until the end of the training to have that conversation, and we sell students a false bill of goods. Whereas if instead we start from the end, right, and we have an employer in their hometown say, I need people to do this job. Who wants to come work for me and get upskilled to do it? We solve that problem. And by the way, it solves 2 problems at once. It means the person in San Diego doesn't have to go move to Nebraska. It also means that the person in Nebraska, like, there are hospitals in Nebraska that are just dying to have those respiratory therapists. And there's someone in that community who now is getting access to a job that maybe they'd never heard of before, and that is going to allow them to have a family sustaining wage without leaving their town. So this is about understanding that, yes, we as a society are more mobile than ever. We can be more mobile than ever. That does not mean that that is what is right for every student, right? For many of us, getting to live in the communities that raised us and getting to stay as a part of that social fabric is the number one priority. How do we make sure that we build job pathways that accommodate that?
And that's probably why so many students are choosing online, right? They're going to school online because they're like, I'm bound here to this tiny town and I don't have a college here. So I'm going to do a health and wellness degree online. Oh, well, now I am in a tiny town and no one needs a health and wellness counselor here.
What irony, right? Like, let's talk about the irony that you are tapping into. That is, it would be funny if it wasn't so maddening and harmful to students, which is that you came to our online program because you are place bound. And then we are going to get you a degree that requires you become magically unstuck from that place bound requirement, right? Like, you had to take a degree with us online because you can't leave. And we're going to get you that degree and then say on the back end of, oh, it's fine as long as you're willing to leave and go somewhere. And you should have known that, right? That is unconscionable, and we have to do better.
Totally. I'm like all in on this concept. Some a book that I have read recently was about how difficult it is to reimagine things, right? It's easier to live within the structure we know because if I say solve world hunger or homelessness, it's really hard to reimagine how things may have been. You flipped the script. You reimagined a totally different world. How has it been? I mean, just as a founder with this world that you created, how has it been? Have you been met with resistance? Are people accepting of this? What does this look like to you?
It has been so hard, as is every founder's journey, right? And I will say, I think first, what's interesting to think about for me is I never thought of myself as a higher ed person, and I still don't. And I think there's a lot of power in that. Of I was not trying to design a university. I was trying to find teachers for my classrooms as a K-12 principal. And so there is, I think a lot of times in the founding space, we over index on industry expertise. And industry experts are really good at helping you recreate the industry that you already have. But for me, the naivete and the ignorance was really bliss. Of I had no idea what higher education was supposed to have happening under the hood because I'd never been in there before. I just knew what I needed to be able to hire the adults working in my building and minimum wage jobs as teachers, right? And I could tell you that problem inside and out and what would solve it. And so starting with that was and continues to be our North Star. And it's why to this day, I do not spend it much, if any, of my time in higher ed meetings and conventions. I spend a lot of my time in staffing conventions, right? And in
Yeah.
economic mobility for individuals and at job fairs, because staying close to those learners and to those employers and living inside of their problem is how you build something new that is unbridled by what has been. Now, to it being hard, I will say the flip side of that benefit of not being attached to all of those systems is that then people don't take you seriously. We in
Mm.
higher education put more of an index on having the right credentials and the right job resume than any industry I've ever met before. And so there was a ton of resistance when we first started this about, well, this isn't how higher education works. And when you would probe why, the answer would just be, well, because that's just not what we do. Um, and in theory, you'd think, well, great, that's easy to overcome then. I actually think that's much harder to overcome than concrete issues, right? Of, oh, well, that's going to be an issue because it violates this piece of legislation, or
Mm.
because it isn't compliant with this type of Pell funding requirement. Those are surmountable challenges, and they're concrete, and you can point to them and you can know when you've addressed them. The hardest thing about breaking into this space was that people wouldn't be able to put their finger on it, but they would just have this feeling of like, well, that's not a college degree. That can't be real. That can't be rigorous. And that unstated bias that lives below the waterline that people don't even realize they have and are certainly therefore not open to it being challenged. That was the hardest part of this journey, without a doubt.
That makes sense. I mean, you're all kind of this like massive threat, right? There's institutions where they have their peer accreditors, we'll call it peer institutions, right? Who are you comparable to? What are your peer institutions? How do you stack next to them? You're like in a different league. You're not a peer institution. This has a potential to kind of put everyone else out of business with this model.
This has been for Reach University. This was our accreditor's biggest challenge is we've gone through, I think, 3 peer review cycles now. And at every single one, the question that would come up is, well, who would be our peer institution, right? How would they know what they were looking at? And, I think what is so interesting about this is our goal is to make this degree widely accessible. We want every institution to offer this. And I'm not saying that, and then therefore they should sunset traditional degrees, right? I think there are certain people for whom traditional degrees are the experience they want and it's what they prefer, right? And that's great. That's fine. But there shouldn't just be nothing available for people for whom traditional degrees aren't what they want, right? Maybe because they can't afford it. Maybe because they're just someone who doesn't like sitting in a classroom all day, but they're smart and they love to learn and they could fill one of those skilled roles. And so our hope is that these institutions start adopting these at scale. And it's funny that, to your point, even though our goal is not to put anyone else out of business, it is to increase the adoption of these new offerings in those places. A lot of times it is received as that threat of, they're here to try to close us down. And therefore they must be bad. And we must do everything we can to prevent this from happening.
Oh, I can see that playing out at every higher ed conference possible.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
understand why you don't play in that sandbox and go to the other people who do need skilled, because the reality is like you said, those other conferences, they need skilled workers. And I bet you they are so excited to have you in that room listening to them.
That's right. Well, and I think again, it comes back to this idea of in higher ed, there's this idea of if you make it easier for the person, not that you water down the content, but you make it easier for the person, that is somehow a sign that you are lower in quality. It being hard and lots of people failing out is the sign that you have a rigorous program, which is so intellectually lazy for us as a group that are supposed to be all about intellectual rigor. I remember a debate I was having with someone at a traditional school of education where they were talking about, the problem with a model like yours is that remote learning is just not as effective. We need people on campus so that they can so that we can teach them better. And you could start with the first question, well, what's your evidence that they're actually learning more? Do they have higher passage rates on their praxis exams? Do they have higher retention rates when they enter the classroom as a teacher? Do they get higher evaluation marks from their reviewers in their credentialing programs? And none of that evidence existed, first of all. But then second of all, I step back and say, well, remote from where? Because I think the important thing to note here is when we're talking about apprenticeship degrees, we're saying that I know that no one wants to hire a first year teacher for a good reason, which is that experience matters. And so, yes, they are remote from your college campus because they are getting more experience and more feedback by an order of 10, right? By an entire order of magnitude more. So, what would be your evidence in terms of data around your passage rates or around what you've heard from employers? Like, what piece of evidence do you have beyond your own personal biases that this is somehow lower quality? But in higher education, we do have a knee jerk reaction of if it's different than how I do it, and God forbid it be more convenient for someone or lower cost, it must be because it's not as rigorous as what I do, which is, again, just it is such this is direct and this is a harsh thing to say, but it is so intellectually lazy.
I totally agree. And I always say to faculty, like, flexibility is not a synonym for lack of rigor. If we're flexible with
Right.
our students and we meet them where they are, we're not reducing the rigor of our degree by like having a heart and caring about our students.
That's right. And conversely, just making it difficult, right? Like making it insanely expensive to be on that campus and making it really like there's no evidence that that's actually better preparing students. You're just torturing them. Like that's just you getting to be a masochist or a sadist, I guess. Like, and I'm not sure that that's what we should be celebrating.
Totally. And how does it, making a student stay up for X hours a night while their kid is sleeping, producing a 10-page paper, how is that more valuable than 10 hours on the job?
That's right, especially if they're writing a paper about what they would do on the job, right? That's the
Yes.
thing that I always find so funny is you're going to have a student write a term paper about how they would support a student with learning disabilities. My apprentices are going to go in and they're going to actually support a student with learning disabilities. And they're going to have to use all of the same theories, but they're going to actually have to do it. And then when their ideas don't work, they're going to have to fix it and they're going to have to get feedback and they're going to have to come explain to me what happened and why. And yes, they wrote a 10-page paper for you. They actually learned how to do it in an apprenticeship model.
It's so cool. Now, kind of let's take it down to like how this actually happens. So a student enrolls, let's say they want to be a teacher, right? What does that look, what does their day-to-day look like? Do they have assignments that they're turning in? Like, I'm really curious about the logistics of it.
Absolutely. So let's talk about it from around our 5 pillars that we talk about all the time of what makes an apprenticeship degree. And so what that means is first is that professional capital piece. So one of the first big things that's different is how the enrollment happens. In a traditional model, Mallory goes to a university and just signs up on her own. It's a B2C deal. Now let's say Nicole is, Mallory's alter ego who's deciding to go the apprenticeship route. Nicole is already working at her school. She can't just come sign up. She is getting a job at a school, working as a classroom aide or in one of those frontline roles. And then when her employer says, yes, I believe in you and I would be willing to support your upskilling and I would be willing to hire you as a teacher, then she comes and enrolls through her partnership with her district and the university. So distinction number one is this is a B2C play in the first case. And we're talking about moving it to a B2B to C place in the second instance. So that's pillar number one. The second one is around efficiency. Mallory, in her traditional degree, might be going and working in a school setting and every day working with kids. And then when she has to go and write her papers and do everything else, they assume that none of that knowledge and experience exists and she has to start back over again. Nicole is working in a job full time. And those hours, we are then shaping our curriculum to live in dialogue with that, right? So you're working with a student that has a special learning need. What does the theory say you should be doing to support them? How did you support them? How did it work in the ways you thought it would? How was it different? Why does that matter? What are you going to go do tomorrow? So that's that efficiency piece. It also folds in our third pillar of relevance, right? Of making sure that you're being taught by someone who is themselves, someone who has not just experience working in classrooms, but actually has a track record of getting better student outcomes as a classroom teacher or better patient outcomes as a nurse or whatever it is. But your instructors are not people who spend all day researching the theory of teaching. They are themselves practitioners with a track record of success. And so for those first two, I guess numbers 2 and 3 of efficiency and relevance, you are going to your job every day. And that is 50% of your college credits is the job itself. And then when you go to class, you are discussing what you learned there and why it matters under the supervision and with the feedback from experts in the field who are working with you and other people in the same situation as you. The next piece is flexibility. So, like, when do those classes happen? I know this might seem obvious, but they probably shouldn't happen Tuesday at 10 a.m., right? If that's when you're working in a school. But that is when many colleges offer their programs, and you just have to be free then. So, in apprenticeship degrees, the courses are always scheduled outside of the workday, such that 3 things are true. A person does not need private transportation, it does not conflict with work, and they do not need childcare. In the teaching world, that usually meant for us classes that are held in the evenings after people had put their kids down to bed around 7 or 8 p.m. For a total of about 4 hours a week, like 2 hours on a Monday and 2 hours on a Wednesday, or the same thing on a Tuesday and Thursday in the evening time. And those were held online on Zoom. So you could put your kids down to bed, go into the living room. We would send you a computer with a hotspot in it if you need it, and you'd log in and do your classes there. And so those are the first 4. The final one that I'll talk about that isn't about the day-to-day experience, but I do think it matters, is the affordability piece. And so in the traditional model, Mallory is going on and taking on $10,000 of loans at a minimum, right? Let's say she's going to an in-state institution. She's taking on $10,000 in student loans to cover tuition, and she's hoping she'll pay back at the end. Meanwhile, Nicole, being ever so wise and enrolling in an apprenticeship degree program, is getting paid to earn her degree. And she's not taking on any debt because she gets paid for that work that counts as half of her college credits. And then meanwhile, she is also able to braid together Pell plus apprenticeship funding to cover all of the costs of tuition. At Reach University, we were asking students to pay $75 a month just so that they had skin in the game. But if students could demonstrate need, we were able to waive that as well. And so those are the 5 pillars, right, of that really shape that day-to-day experience. And it comes down to professional capital, making sure that your employer is excited from the beginning, and then efficiency, relevance, flexibility, and affordability.
I love it. Now, I'm going to ask another kind of higher ed question. What role, like textbooks, traditional kind of pillars of higher education, a syllabus, textbook, core modules and competencies, and a weekly structure with assignments, discussions, what role do all those play here, if any?
So we look on paper like a traditional university, right? If we run on Carnegie credits and you have a syllabus and you have faculty, but there are a couple of big key distinctions that we had to rethink of, again, trying to solve the problem for our learners as opposed to trying to just operate the way everyone had done and then, making some innovations on the margins. So the first big difference for us is that those courses, while you do meet every week, it's not just a random smattering of courses. I'm taking this like English class and this science class. It is every semester we pick a content area that you are going deep in. So science or math or whatever it might be. And in that semester, we are going deep on the content. We are going deep on the pedagogy to teach that content. And we are going deep on the sort of student supports and work that would wrap around being able to deliver that in the classroom. And so while you have the same workload and the same number of credits and everything else, what it actually feels like is this semester, I'm getting really good at learning how to teach literacy, right? Because even if you're a science or a math teacher, you got to learn to how to teach literacy. That's everybody's job in a school. And so that's one of the first big differences is we integrate the content and the scope and sequence thematically so that the courses are in dialogue with one another, they're in dialogue with the work, and there's that cohesive experience. That's the first thing that's different. The second big thing that's different is we do not request textbooks. I think textbooks are a scam. They charge tons of money. There is no evidence to me that is how, in the days of the internet, that is how you acquire and apply information. Now, we want our students to read rigorous content, right? We're not just abdicating that. We want them to be people who can do that work. But we do that by pulling relevant journal articles, by pulling in papers that are based on praxis, right? The intersection of theory and practice and putting that into motion. And so we still have them do the reading and the thinking and the writing. We're just not asking them to take a textbook and read a chapter and then write a paper about what that means, because there's no evidence that actually does anything to make them a good teacher.
I love that. And you're not giving them a case study. You're not saying, imagine you have a student who does this. They have students.
That's
And it
right.
sounds
Their life is the case study, right? So we're not saying, oh, here's a paragraph about Johnny. No, you go to school and you tell me which of your students are you writing about here. And guess what? It's going to be a ton more complicated than that theoretical case study, because it turns out that real kids are a ton more complicated than imaginary kids. And so it's going to be, you might be taking a case study that is one of your real students, and you might be thinking about that student through 4 different lenses, right? You might be thinking about them one way when you're in your child development class. And there might be some things about that don't quite make sense, but they make a lot more sense when you go into your class on teaching math pedagogy. And the math pedagogy class is going through, students who have certain learning needs around dysgraphia. And suddenly they make a lot more sense to you now. And so we want that richness. We want that complication, because that's going to be what your real job is. And we want you to come out of our program looking a lot more like a 4th or 5th year teacher than a 1st year teacher.
I love this. I love all of this. And this is like the fact that this all came from your brain blows my mind a little bit. So now it's craft. Is it safe to say that like craft is kind of just taking it from the education model and then just making it large scale?
That's right. And the good news is, for as much as I have been sitting on here lamenting all of the higher ed partners who don't want to go innovate, many do. And in fact, there are already over 30 institutions of higher education using the craft platform. And they started with them in teaching and doing teaching apprenticeships. Today, 40 states have teaching apprenticeships. And so we are seeing this movement come to life. And our goal is that this does genuinely become a movement where it's not just one institution doing it here or there. It's not just a teaching thing. It is happening at scale. And so what craft is meant to do is to fix the very boring but very mission critical piece of data infrastructure, right? Like I trust universities, faculty, the ones that want to do this work, that coalition of the willing, to come together and build a phenomenal curriculum and to create incredibly thoughtful student supports. I believe they'll do all of that. What we were seeing happen time and time again is they'd get that right, and then they would still get tripped up and blocked from getting to do the programming that was great programming, because the Department of Labor needed them to submit their Appendix A and to have a ton of competencies ready that they were going to put into Rapids along people's 671s. And they would say that to someone and they'd go like, I don't know what any of those things are, right? And because why would you and how would you? And so our goal is to be the plumbing that just integrates into your existing data systems, your learning management system, your SIS, and to just automate that data collection and processing so that higher education that is interested in really supporting learners in this apprenticeship pathway can focus on that and not on learning 10,000 new acronyms around data.
I think this is so needed. Like I can think, as we're talking, I can think back to multiple students just across my lifespan who wanted to be teachers and couldn't. I mean, especially like 12 years ago, before internship programs were really a thing, they were like, I have a full-time job. I can't student teach for 40 hours for, 2 semesters. How do I ever become a teacher? So I'm glad that even traditional universities have started to fix that a little bit more with more of their internship stuff. But I also think about healthcare colleges. We had so many single parents who are like, I want to be a medical assistant so badly, but where will my child go during the day? Where?
Exactly. And how, again, it would be funny if it wasn't harmful. How laughable that I would hear stories about people who are working in schools as paraprofessionals, training to become teachers, and would have to drop out of their program because they were going to be asked to go into that same school next week and do the same job, but now as a student teacher, and they weren't going to get paid for that. And they couldn't afford 10 weeks of not getting paid. I literally doing the same work, literally in the same place, and we were just going to derail everything because we couldn't get out of our own way on that. It's the same thing in healthcare. And one of the things we've had to work on is in many states, getting legislation changed so that you can get paid for those clinical hours, and changing it so that the people who are doing that training are getting paid more than just an extra dollar an hour. Like if someone is going to really be a great preceptor and train you well, they need to get paid for that. That's hard work. And so it is maddening sometimes to watch the ways in which we trip over our own feet and get in the way of people getting the training they need. And we think that data can be a big part of that, and that if we can make sure that data isn't one of the things getting in the way, that we can get a lot more adoption.
Totally. Well, and when you were talking about nurses, I can think of many institutions where, they have an FMP program and they
Mhm.
have nurses who are working full time and now they need their clinical hours. No, you can't go where you're working. You have to find another clinic who can accommodate you outside of your traditional 40, 60-hour work week. It is
That's right.
maddening.
It is. And by the way, now think about this. One of the big reasons we have a nursing shortage in America is not because we don't have enough students wanting to go into nursing, and not because we don't have enough nursing programs, but because they can't get enough clinical hours. And so they have to rate limit their seats. Well, how many hospitals, like, yes, if you're telling me that what it means to have someone come be a student to do their clinical hours with me is someone who I don't know, who I have no investment in, who's just going to come and get in my way and gum up the system and gum up the works, and then go work somewhere else after this, and I'm not going to see any financial return or benefit or incentive. Yeah, it's not surprising that a lot of hospitals are not taking that offer. But if by contrast, what you're saying is someone who's already in your hospital, right? Like it's not just that you know and like them, they've already cleared their background check, taken their drug test, have been onboarded and know how to use your sites. Like that same person, you're going to let continue to work at the place where you're doing, you're going to invest in their training. And by the way, that's going to pay off for you because on the other side, they're then going to become one of your nurses. I don't think we will have a big clinical hours problem when we create that value proposition for hospitals.
Totally. I totally. I have nothing else to say but except for totally. Um, so Mallory, we're almost at the end. What is next for you? Because yeah, I mean, you just have created amazing things for the last I don't know how many years. Uh, Kraft was just acquired by Western Governors. What's next for you?
Yeah, so I am continuing to lead craft in this new seat at Western Governors. What's really important is if there's a message that anyone has hung around and listened to me howl at the moon for this long, the big thing I want them to know is that I would love to chat with you because my full-time job at Craft is to support any employer, any university, any workforce board. If you are interested in creating these job embedded pathways, we have received some very generous support to help bring this ecosystem to life. And what I am so grateful to Western Governors for is that it is not positioned as this being a tool that is unique and specific to the university. This tool is actually not a part of the university. It is under the same umbrella nonprofit corporation that handles lots of open data ecosystem tools. And our goal is to seed the end skilled labor vacancies by seeding 8 to 10 million apprenticeship degree pathways in the next 10 years. Anyone who's interested in playing a part in that, my full-time job with some very generous support is to help bring that to life. So that's what I'm doing. And I would be really excited to chat with anyone in the space looking to get involved.
I have a couple people that come to mind, so I'm gonna send them your way because I'm talking to lots of people these days. But Mallory, I just thank you for being here. I can't wait to watch this continue even further, and I am like all in on how can I move this forward because the way that we're doing it doesn't make sense, but this makes a lot of sense. All the sense in the world.
Well, thank you. And I will take you up on that because it's going to take all of us, right? I feel very humbled that I get to be a part of this movement. This movement is so much bigger than any one of us. And it's going to take everybody committing to rethinking this and taking this leap together. And Nicole, would be better for it with you in it.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here, Mallory. Again, I'm just so grateful. I'm sure that you will have people reaching out after this. I'm sending people your way, but whatever I can do to support this mission, I am in.
Please do. Thank you. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Mallory.